I would like to share a story about the beginning days of walking the Tantric path and, the experience I've had on this path when it comes to retreats. For me, this is really where my work began. I don't remember at that time if my teacher was holding one-on-one session work. I just remember that the way that I could learn from her and about this path and about these lineages was within the container of retreat space. I think this is one of the most potent ways to learn about oneself. Number one, because we're in group space. And I've always said that the group is really where the medicine is. Each time a group comes together, it's a new constellation, which means that this group of people that gather at this moment in time will never happen again. This already is the medicine. The groups are so carefully curated. The people that come together, the people that commit to a retreat really want to be there. From my experience with self and then holding groups as well, I've seen that a person won't commit to something as expensive and time consuming and energy consuming as a retreat without being really serious, right? So everybody that is committing to a retreat really wants to be there, and there's something really unique about that constellation that comes together, and it just feeds the group dynamic. There will be one person that triggers you, there'll be one person that you see yourself in. There's potential there, there's desire, there's someone that invokes a fear in you, or a terror, or a grief, somebody that you so deeply connect with. And group dynamic, group energy is so much bigger than just one person. For example, myself working with somebody in a private session space, that brings out a different dynamic. But when we're coming to group, we really are working with the essential of community, the essential of reality. Everybody is there for a purpose. Everyone has desired to meet parts of themselves in some way. So it's a really radical experience when a group can come together and move through these practices together and start to become more of who they are, right? Peeling away the layers, the armoring, the bracing, the tensing, and dropping into stillness. And we really get to meet our essence and the essence of another through group dynamic. Number two is integration. When I would step into retreat space, it really didn't matter what was happening in my life, because the moment I was there in nature, in this new place, with these new people, with a teacher, stepping into the tantric practices and the teachings, life would just simplify. And I could just be there with all of myself in that moment. And there were no distractions from the outside world. I would be working with myself for 7 to 10 days at a time, deep in the practices. And there's so much space on these retreats to really land into the practices, really land into the self. And there's something so special about that, because the work is so dense. And there's so many layers to move through when we're working with tantric practice. And it is a bit more challenging when we have a session here in the city, or a day workshop, or a temple. And for those few hours, we really are with self and a practitioner. or maybe a small group of people, but then we go off into our cars, we go back to our home, we're back into our pattern. We don't really have space from our pattern. We don't have space from our comforts. We maybe have children to tend to, family dynamics, lover dynamics. And so this does bring a bit of a challenge when it comes to landing into the spaciousness that arrives when we're de-armoring through tantric practice. And I find retreats so valuable when it comes to integrating, because there's space now to feel the space, to land into the space between, without the usual distraction, without the usual pattern. And for me, there's so much magic in this. I can really land into what is unraveling here. And not only that, when I am unraveling into self, I'm not alone, right? I'm also feeding off of, and what is supporting my unraveling and my integration process is the group that are going through a very similar situation. The teacher to support, I can ask questions, I can really interact with this living dialogue of what is happening inside my body and heart in that moment. I remember retreats being a place where I could really sense my true capacity and my true desires coming back online. I could learn to express my boundaries, my needs, my desires to the group. You know, retreats really were the place where my voice came back online. This connection between body and what was alive there, and my throat expressing what was alive inside of me. I think a really valuable aspect of retreat space is beginning to filter through how I would like the template of my life to be. And I remember this very clearly with my first ever tantric retreat. It was so big. There was so much that happened. There was so much that was moving through me. Wow, my nervous system went through a lot over that 7-day period. And it was so beautiful and blissful and expansive. And then I got home to my pattern, to my life, and I remember going through quite a contraction, because I started noticing, and this realization, this wisdom only came much later, many years later, but at the time it sort of felt like a contraction, melancholy. The bracing came back online. I went back into compulsions around food to bring me comfort, because I was so uncomfortable in this new expanded body, but back in my life, which felt really contracting. And many years later, I realized that what was happening was I desired to live my life the way retreats were navigated, but that my life itself wasn't aligning with that retreat energy and space. And of course, the whole point of retreats is to experience other and to expand and evolve and remember and become and de-armor and unravel. And so there's so much of this releasing happening over retreats, and when we go back into our lives, there's a huge shift. There can be a misalignment. And it's not always realistic to think that how your life is on retreat, it will match that in life when you're back in life. However, there was this piece around, I want this to be my templates. And I remember my teacher saying this many years later at another retreat. I remember her saying, what would you like the template of your life to be? And at the time, I didn't understand what this meant. And slowly I started to remember that the meaning of this is how I want to live my life. I want to be in the Kashmiri massage. I want to be in the Tandava. I want peace. I want a peaceful life. I want quiet. I want to be in nature all the time. I want to do extreme sports and go on adventures. I want to be in love with myself, with a partner, with my life. I just want to be happy. I want to be free. And so all of these things I was experiencing on retreats, the freedom, the expansion, I started to integrate these into my life. And very slowly over time, over many years, really, it's been about a decade of this, my life has slowly become what I desired on retreats, this template. And this is what I think retreats do for us. I think there's so much value in having this experience, and it's not to be taken lightly. This is not the kind of experience we can only have on retreats. I really believe that it's something we can integrate fully into our lives. And because these experiences are so enormous, when we allow the integration, they do become life. They do become life. They become your way of living. So I invite you to the Body of Alta, which is a retreat coming up for couples. It's an incredibly immersive experience where we will be navigating self-tending practices and practices with our partners to become more of ourselves, to release patterns, painful patterns of entanglement that only perpetuate suffering in our dynamic with our partner. What would it feel like to completely soften in our connection through de-armored hearts, de-armored bodies, de-armored minds? Who would we be? Who would we meet then?